Hi there, it's Monday. Let's take a couple minutes to appreciate an old show. Today, I felt like this being the first time we're kind of doing this, I wanted to talk about one of the first shows that had like a really big impact on me as a kid. One of the first shows. There's a good amount of other ones, but specifically anime. This is one of the first anime that really had an impact on me. And of course, I'm talking about Fairy Tail. Now, Fairy Tail starts out with the Makao arc, and that is simply a little arc where we go and we're gonna save some idiot old man from the guild. Meanwhile, we also meet Lucy, the, well, some people would say she was the protagonist, but that's just blatantly wrong. Protagonist of Fairy Tail is Fairy Tail, obviously. Anyway, the Makao arc was probably a good 6 out of 10 start to an anime. It was pretty mild, it wasn't very exciting, but, you know, it was somewhat enjoyable. Less enjoyable on the rewatch, if we're being honest. And then there was the Daybreak arc, which honestly is just kind of the arc that feels like the first arc of Fairy Tail because it's the first time that we had a continuous good narrative happening. And that was when we got to meet Virgo and a few different things, and we had the author who was basically kept in a cell and abused and all that good stuff, you know. Yeah, the Daybreak arc was great. Standard 7 out of 10 arc. I more often than not completely forget about the Eisenwald arc, not because it was bad, but just because I guess it was overall kind of forgettable and didn't have very much relevance to the overall series, other than the fact that I guess we got to meet a few more guild masters that would never really be important again, I don't think. But we did get to meet Eisenwald, who would also never be important again. It was pretty middle of the road. I would give it a 6 out of 10 personally. And then we have the Leon arc, which is where we start getting some backstory on Gray. And I have to say, this is probably, as far as Fairy Tail is concerned, where I started getting really emotionally invested in the series, because granted I enjoyed it, I enjoyed the character chemistry up to this point a lot, and that was definitely the main driving force in watching the show up to this point, but seeing Gray's backstory in this arc, or at least the first tastes of it we would get as Gray continued to get more arcs later on, I really, really enjoyed Leon's arc. Even though it wasn't particularly long, or at least didn't feel too long, it was very enjoyable. This is the one where like they had the moon drip stuff happening on the cursed island with like the demon people or whatever. It was, I don't know, all that stuff was kind of just felt like it fell to the background as we got to see and learn more about Gray, who is definitely a very lovable character. I think his backstory is one of the pillars of Fairy Tail that makes it great. And then we got the Phantom Lord arc, which I loved. I loved the Phantom Lord arc so much. We got to meet Gajeel as in his most dickish form, I guess, when Gajeel was the least likable, in my opinion. We got to see a lot of, I mean, I think Gajeel being introduced in this arc is actually fairly significant, because I think he got some of the best character development in the entire series for sure. Anyone who would disagree with that, I just don't know how you're going to disagree with that. I feel like Gajeel and Lexus are two of like the pillars of character development in the series. Introducing Gajeel here was, it felt good, and the arc definitely ended in a way where you could see him later joining the guild. Other than that, we also got to see some stuff with Lizana at this point, and we got the first teases of like more stuff regarding different characters in the guild. I think this was the first 8 out of 10 arc for me in Fairy Tail. I loved the Phantom Lord arc. I know that might be something of a hot take for some people. I have no idea. People generally don't like Fairy Tail as much as I do, but I think the Phantom Lord arc was actually really, really, really good. Unfortunately, then we get to the Loki arc, which yeah, I didn't think it was too great. The arc felt kind of out of place. It was really short. Didn't even feel like it was really an arc. It felt like something that should have been part of another arc, and they could have set it up a whole lot better. As far as what actually happened, the arc was okay. I think this is a solid like 5 out of 10 for the series. Not because I didn't like any of the characters. Loki was okay, but just the placement of the arc made no sense, and it felt like it should have been involved in something bigger. But it wasn't, which will become a continuous theme for any of the arcs revolving around Lucy's Zodiac characters. Any of the arcs revolving around them tend to just not be good. But another reason the Loki arc might have not been so great was honestly because it was between the Phantom Lord arc and the Tower of Heaven arc, which is another super good arc of Fairy Tail. And this is the arc where we got the background for Urza. Now, Urza's backstory, like, unfortunately, the follow-up to this arc is the weakest point of this arc. This arc in of itself is debatably one of the best arcs in all of Fairy Tail. 8 out of 10 for me. I'll get that out of the way right now. But, while they developed Urza's character great, we got to see Dragon Force for the first time. We got our Power of Friendship, which if you just can't stand Power of Friendship, like, stop watching this video. It's just a thing in Fairy Tail. Is it the same as a power system? No, honestly, Power of Friendship is kind of just bogus, and we all know it, but hey, some of us love it. But no, this arc was really enjoyable, and I would say the weakest point of this arc is the fact that it didn't matter as much as it should have. When the characters come back later in any capacity, they don't feel significant, and they could have done a lot more with the follow-up of this arc. I feel like the show went back to normal so much after this that it kind of just almost felt out of place, honestly. The next arc was Lexus's arc, the Battle of Fairy Tail arc, which was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. Was it a good arc? Not really. No. By most accounts, it wasn't, unfortunately. But I would say it was at least enjoyable. I think that's really one of the things Fairy Tail has going for it, is that Fairy Tail, above all else, whether it's good or anything else, you can't deny there's an enjoyment factor, which inherently makes the show better, and this arc is a testament to that. That said, with different ways that the arc ends and different things, I would say as far as the emotional high points of this arc did have a good amount of emotional high points, especially regarding Lexus's character and the beginning of his journey from being the most dickish, just not nice guy to someone I think all of us kind of honestly love. And then we get to the Arashion Sace arc. This arc would have been better off just not. Just not. We did get to meet Wendy, which is great because Wendy is wholesome and lovable. Wendy's great. But unfortunately, the Arashion Sace arc started a kind of repetitive feeling thing in Fairy Tail, where we had a group of bad guys who had a number associated to them. That was how many of them there were, and you just kind of go beat the bad guys who have some super evil objective and complete the quest, and that's basically the best summary of the arc that could be given. We got more Jalal in this arc, which was kind of the highlight of the arc, honestly. Jalal was by himself 10 times more entertaining than the entire group of bad guys by themselves. Honestly, I think Fairy Tail would have been better off if they just made Jalal the big bad guy for the first half of it before it became Acnologia, and the Arashion Sace could have been like a group of Jalal's underlings or something. I don't know. Just the way they decided to introduce like so many enemies who would later become less and less relevant, they would have been better probably just making it an arc that focused on Jalal more. Even though he wasn't the arc, he was all the good parts of this arc, and the Arashion Sace were kind of all the bad parts. This being an arc called the Arashion Sace arc, I'm sure you can understand why I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Also, again, I forgot to say what the Lexus arc was. I'm going to give the Lexus arc a 7 out of 10, because it might have not been... Maybe a 6 out of 10 is more fair. But I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because I like it, and I like Fairy Tail a lot. And honestly, maybe the Arashion Sace arc is more of a 5 out of 10. Let's go with 5 out of 10 for Arashion Sace arc. Sorry, Arashion Sace, I just don't like you that much. The Daphne arc. Negative 10 out of 10. And then we have the Atlas arc, which, as opposed to most people, I think I like it a lot more than most people, especially on the rewatch. I think my first watching of the Atlas arc, it was just like, oh, this is okay, I guess. This is just more stuff happening. Oh, Mystigan, we can understand Mystigan better. Cool. But honestly, on the rewatch, the Atlas arc is one of the most unique arcs in Fairy Tail. It's not just about going and beating some group of bad guys causing a problem. No, this arc honestly felt closer to a thing that would just like a random like side adventure in a D&D campaign or something. Like, the arc felt so... It did feel out of place, but it felt so unique, and it added so much to Fairy Tail in terms of world building even, because now we're understanding that there's other, basically parallel dimensions out there. Fairy Tail does not do the best on world building. I don't think anyone in their right mind is going to tell you that Fairy Tail genuinely has good world building, but as far as their world building goes, the fact that they established these parallel universes is kind of cool. And on top of that, this arc for me was one of the best structured arcs. If you go back and watch it, the pacing in this arc was good. The characters they introduced were naturally interesting, being parallels to our main cast. And then overall, it just felt enjoyable. I think the weakest point of this arc was the antagonist, who was just kind of meh, and some of the weirdness that happened with some of the other characters. It was just the antagonists were kind of weak. But as far as the setting of Daedalus, and the world building it did, and the character development we got, and as we got to watch other characters, we got to meet Panther Lily, we got to see Gajiel more and more. I think a lot of Gajiel's character development happened in this arc. Honestly, I enjoyed this arc a lot, as we got to see a world of Fairy Tail without magic, at least not in the traditional sense. And real quick, I'm gonna give the Daedalus arc a good... I think antagonists are really important. I think I can only give it a 7 out of 10, but it is a very beloved 7 out of 10 for me. Then we get to the Tenryu Island arc. The Tenryu Island arc, I guess, kind of includes the time skip at the end, so we'll talk about that. I feel like the Tenryu Island arc was good. The what got me into Fairy Tail was actually a clip from the Tenryu Island arc. One of my friends showed me a clip on YouTube of Natsu backing down to this super powerful character we would come to know as Gildarts, and that was a very interesting scene to me that actually drew me into the whole series. Granted, I was like 15, and to me that was like, oh wow, that looks really cool. I need to watch hundreds of episodes of this multiple times. But I think this arc was really strong and really good. I had a few things working against it, being that, like, it felt irrelevant later, being that the arc was kind of to determine S-class stuff, and I feel like a lot of that just didn't matter in the rest of the series. So a lot of the stuff that was set up to matter was kind of insignificant, but we did get to meet the big bad Acnologia, who has a cool backstory and a terrible presence in the series that is not done nearly enough justice for how cool he could have been. So yeah, this is kind of the beginning of a lot of bad things in Fairy Tail, but it continues the things we love, and we do get a lot of good moments in this series, and it gives us a few points for reference for later on for how strong Natsu gets, as like the Black Sting character who controls gravity just completely floors Natsu and is more on Gildart's level. Later, we do get to see Natsu make a comeback with that character, so there is that, which I guess matters, but ultimately, I think I can only give this one a 6 out of 10, just because it felt so irrelevant, I guess, to a lot of things. And while I enjoyed the arc pretty significantly, but what I'm also not thinking about, actually, is the antagonist of this arc was actually really good. So maybe I can give it a 7 out of 10. I think I'm just disappointed in the way things happened with Acnologia, which I think a lot of people are. And thinking about that just kind of brings it down for me. But I think this is fairly a 7 out of 10 arc, and the time skip was its own thing, which we will talk about now. We then get the 791 arc, which is just... I honestly don't remember this arc, like, at all, other than the fact that it establishes the time skip. So what I'll talk about is the time skip, which, in my opinion, my professional watching fairy tale way too much in my life opinion, wasn't a time skip. It was time traveling. They didn't help themselves making it feel more like a time skip by, like, focusing on the other characters a little too much. But honestly, they took the main cast of fairy tale, which is the main character of fairy tale, and they didn't experience the 7 years. They went instantly from one point to the other point. So they time traveled. There was no time skip. The world had a time skip, but we experienced time traveling in the main cast of fairy tale. So this is more of the time travel moment than it is a time skip moment, but even then, I think it was somewhat poorly done. And I would say I wish they did this better. I see why they did it narratively for the next arc, which was really good. I think with what they wanted to do with the next arc and things they wanted to happen, pushing the world a little bit further and making it so fairy tale had to earn their rank back as the best, all of that was really cool, and the time traveling was good for setup. I just wish they did the delivery a little bit better, but that's the case with fairy tale a lot. Fairy tale often feels like a lot of things that are set up really, really cool and just could have been delivered better. That's the sad part of fairy tale. But fairy tale as a whole, I love. And I think the time skip and this arc, I guess, the 791 arc, I'm just going to overall kind of give it like a quiet little 4 out of 10 because it was not that good. But I wish it was. Remember how earlier we mentioned that any arc about Lucy's celestial keys and the zodiac things is just bad? Yeah. Now we're gonna... Oh my. Well, that's not supposed to happen. Now we're gonna talk about the key of the Starry Skies arc. The other arc that comes next where we get time with the Butt Jiggle Gang and Lucy Celestials. Yeah, what happened in this arc? I've watched fairy tale like 3 times. Guess it's a 5 out of 10, because I don't even know what happened. It's not bad enough for me to remember hating it, and it's not good enough for me to remember it happening. 5 out of 10. Okay, next is the Grand Magic Games, which honestly just was some of fairy tale at its best. I think a lot of people consider this their favorite arc. A lot of people might hate this arc, but I think this took some of the strongest points of fairy tale and really just emphasized those points. The show is super hype. We got to focus on a multitude of characters who all felt important to the arc, and we got power of friendship at its best, at its most exciting. I think this is kind of where the entire series peaked, and I think that's a pretty agreed upon consensus. The Magic Games was so good and so enjoyable. A lot of good fights. Sting and Rogue made great what do you call those? I guess punching bags? Yeah, punching bags. They were somewhat enjoyable, but the most enjoyable thing about it was watching them get hit in the face over and over and over and over and over and over again. We had a lot of really good flex moments, and honestly, this was just pure hype for a good long time. This arc was somewhat lengthy, not terribly lengthy, but it felt like it went by so fast, despite the amount of episodes, just because it was constant, exciting action, and just an emotional, thrilling ride. I would say this embodied a lot of the thrill of fairy tale, which is what makes fairy tale so good. So yeah, I love this arc. Easy 8 out of 10 for me. This is my personal bias. If you disagree with me, well then I guess you're just kind of incorrect sometimes, and that's okay, everyone is. Another forgettable Celestial Spirits arc. The Eclipse Celestial Spirits. I remember this one because it's bad. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 10. It's bad. It's a pain that this came right after the peak of fairy tale. This was a steep decline from the Grand Magic Games. And yeah, that was sad. And then we got the Sun Village arc, which was short and just made Flare a likable character, introduced Warred as a likable character, and set up the next arc, which would be probably the last, like, really good arc of Fairy Tail that we would get in this main series, at least outside of Fairy Tail Zero, which we'll talk about at the end. Sun Village arc, I'll just give it a nice 7 out of 10. It wasn't remarkable, it wasn't bad, but I would comfortably call it good, and it actually did something Fairy Tail didn't do often, which was give good setup that would have good payoff with good pacing. Honestly, like, this is what makes Fairy Tail so confusing as a series, and how good it is you have moments like the Dark Eclipse Spirit arc, and then you have the Sun Village and Tartaros arc, and before that you also, I don't know, Fairy Tail is so inconsistent, but it's inconsistently a good series with some really not so great times sometimes. Sun Village arc was 7 out of 10. It was good, I enjoyed it. Then we get the Tartaros arc, which is maybe the most emotional arc in the series. In this arc, we watch Gray lose his father, and he gets a lot of closure to his character arc, up to this point at least, and from here on, he's just kind of our emo boy. But we also get one of the best moments Lucy gets with her spirits, which is actually losing Aquarius, which was surprisingly heart-touching. For a moment revolving around one of Lucy's spirits, Aquarius was one of the more likable ones, and seeing her go, potentially forever, did feel impactful. And not only that, this is an example of something that happened in Fairy Tail that did have permanent consequences. We would go on to maybe meet Aquarius again one day as a possibility, but she would never be the same Aquarius, not the one we knew up to this point, and she wouldn't be Lucy's Aquarius. So this is one of the most emotionally impactful and long-lastingly important arcs in the series. This arc felt heavy, and it felt like it had consequences. It felt led up to appropriately, had a satisfying finish, and some really enjoyable battles, as especially getting to see the different demons they had to fight of the Book of Zareth, seeing Natsu and Gray work together in tandem with their extremely overpowered powers at this point. It was a very enjoyable experience. It was very emotional, and another high point of Fairy Tail. I would easily say that this was another 8 out of 10 arc for me. Summarizing the Avatar arc is remarkably easy. The Avatar arc wishes it was the Sun Village arc. It wishes it did set up well. It does have some funny moments. I will say this arc is funny and enjoyable, but not really good or rememberable. I don't know, memorable? I would just give this arc an okay 6 out of 10. And right after that, let's just lean into the Alvarez arc. Being that the Alvarez arc is the last arc we get in the anime, I think it's going to be the last arc I review, because the 100-Year War arc, or 100-Year War, Bleach came into mind, not gonna lie. The 100-Year Quest arc is not animated or necessarily finished yet, as far as I know, so I'm not going to do that one yet. But the Alvarez arc was not what we needed for the conclusion of Fairy Tail. It had some good moments, but ultimately felt kind of flat, and was completely eclipsed by how good the Tartaros arc was, and it definitely didn't hold up to that. And unfortunately, this is also the arc where we saw the conclusion of the two main antagonists of Fairy Tail. First, we got to see Zareth get defeated, which was okay. It was honestly somewhat good. The moment with Mavis was touching. When we got to see August die in front of his mother, who didn't know that August was August, that was definitely emotional. That was probably the saddest point in this arc, especially being the fight between August and Gildarts. Honestly, to me, even though narratively was one of the least important parts of this arc, was the best part of this arc. August's fight with Gildarts was great. The parallels between them, with family, and just who August was and who Gildarts was. They were the monsters. We've always known Gildarts as this monster who's too powerful to be in Fairy Tail, and August was the same thing. August was this monster who, without Gildarts there, they just wouldn't have anyone to really fight August. He was just so many levels above everyone else in knowledge and danger levels that these two paralleled themselves perfectly, and their fight was very satisfying, and I wish we got a lot more of it. The few moments we got between August and Gildarts were the highlight of this entire arc for me, and that is very unfortunate because they had very little narrative importance. In this arc, we saw Agnologia get defeated with the most atrocious use of power of friendship. Up to this point, Fairy Tail had used it relatively well and enjoyably, and while it was heavily used, it felt right. And seeing them defeat the main bad guy because of literal rainbow fire punch power of friendship was just not satisfying. And it didn't feel destructive enough or like there was enough on the line. Honestly, I think this could have been solved if they just killed a few characters. And I know that that people might not necessarily want that, but I think if they allowed a couple character deaths in this, real character deaths, this arc would have felt a lot more impactful, as it should have, as the arc where we addressed the two biggest villains of the entire series. Unfortunately, the Alvarez arc for me is a 5 out of 10. Could have been a lot better, and a 5 out of 10 arc for the end of an anime is really disappointing. Ultimately, to me, Fairy Tail will always be one of my favorite series, because it's touching. It touched me a lot of times. One thing I didn't talk about with the Tenryu Island arc was that the first time I cried in Fairy Tail was watching as Gildarts and Kana embraced, and Kana confessed to him that she was his daughter. There was a lot of good emotional and touching moments in Fairy Tail. Watching Fairy Tail, loving Fairy Tail, you get to feel like part of Fairy Tail in a way that no other series offers. Yeah, Black Clover also has a good system. It's probably written more cohesively for the first arc, the first major arc series at least. And they do have an enjoyable, also sitcom-like group. But I was never a part of the Black Bulls in the same way that I will always feel like a part of Fairy Tail. And that's important to me. That's an important feeling. So, despite Fairy Tail's issues, despite a negative 10 out of 10 arc, despite a lot of 5 out of 10 and a few below that arcs, the high points of Fairy Tail will always hold it for me as one of my favorite experiences with any show I've ever watched. I hope you've enjoyed this. And I'll see you next Monday with me reviewing all the arcs of some other series. Let me know what you want me to do in the comments down below. And if I haven't seen it, well, I guess maybe I should. But if you know ones I have seen, try to recommend those ones to me. See you next time. Hey, YouTube's trying to get you to watch this video over here. I think you should click on it. I think you should click on that video. I also think you should subscribe. I think you want to listen to me. You think you want to listen to me. You're gonna hit the thumbs up button. If you're still watching at this point, don't be. Click on this video over here before the video's over. The video's gonna end soon. You're running out of time. Go, 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 go.